Good morning, it's Kate from Growing Our Own Joy, and this morning I'm going to kind of take you on a garden tour. My camera work is not great, I'm still getting used to this, but I figured I would take you along and show you. It's like 8 a.m. and it just rained last night, so everything's a little wet, but here we go. So this garden bed right here is my pollinator island, and it was looking pretty brown because it hadn't been raining, but we did just get some rain. So I have a bergamot or bee balm. It stopped flowering, the birds were loving it, but it is putting off some new growth, so I'm hoping that we'll have some more flowers soon. This used to be where my garlic was, but I had some extra tomato plants, so I planted those, and they are starting to get some fruit, and these ones are so cool. I don't know what these are. I think they are a volunteer for my compost, but I will show you. I just think the shape is so interesting. If anyone knows what these are, let me know, because I know I did not plant them. Here I have some lavender and cosmos and other wildflowers. I'm trying my best to water, but it's been hot. It's been like almost 100 every day around here and no rain, and that's not typical. So everything's looking a little dry, but I'm hoping that we got rain the last 2 days, and I think we'll get a couple more days of rain and things will come back. But look at this Cosmo. This is like my favorite. Let's see if I can get it. So I have my Wheelbarrow Planter that I had repurposed from something I found on the side of the road. We painted it. It's been here a while, so the paint's kind of chipping off, but there's some flowers in here. And then there are some beans growing right along the back, and they'll climb this fence, and there's some more beans climbing the fence. They're just growing in buckets in here, and they do great in there every year. Beans are a little slow this year too. I don't know if it's because of the temperature or my soil or the watering or what, but they're seeming to catch up now. In this bed right here, I have some beans. I think those are dragon tongue beans. Some leeks, celery. This basil right here is, where is it? Is being eaten up by bugs. So it is making a comeback. I think when things get hot, the bugs just start eating all your stuff. At least from my experience, that's what's happened. I have this wine barrel here that has some chives, and this is pretty cool. That right there is a volunteer calendula. I did not plant it, and I did not plant those marigolds either. They volunteered, and I notice that right there, there's another calendula coming up, which is so exciting. And I planted some zucchini squash seeds in here, seeing if I could get another round of squash, because we have a really bad problem with vine borers, and I see that they're just starting to come up right there, so that's exciting. This right here is my green stalk grower, and I'll tell you some of the things that are in here. So at the top there's a nasturtium, there's some beans, there's a purple bean in there, which is exciting. I already picked a few. Actually, I was trying to move this green stalk and rotate it a little, and I broke off some of this bean plant, and it's recovering nicely. There's some tomatoes growing out of it, and kale, These kales sometimes get those little cabbage worms on them, so every morning I just come out and check them. And actually, any of the leaves that get too damaged to eat, I just feed to my turtle, so that works out fine. There's some Swiss chard growing in here. That does really well. It never bolts. And more beans. And this tomato plant here broke off in a windstorm. I just stuck it back in here seeing if it'll root, but I'm not sure what will happen with that. And this kale looks like it's more eaten than yesterday, so let me try to check it and see if there are any bugs again. Sorry for my shaky hands. I am not the best at this, but if I don't start, I will never get better, so bear with me. I don't see any bugs on here, so that's probably just residual. I do see, though, that we're starting to get tomatoes on these tomato plants that are on the green stalk, and there's some more tomatoes right up there. And this bed is like very sparsely planted. I have tried to plant things quite a few times in it, and I don't know what's going on with it, but there are some beans. They can climb this trellis here, and lots of beans. That right there, I thought, here, let me close up on it. I thought that right there, that cauliflower, was dead. I planted a bunch in like the spring, and none of them made it. They all got eaten by bugs. And then I was weeding, and I saw that cauliflower just starting to take off. So I actually think I started that back in, like, I don't even know, probably March, and it's just starting to take off now. But we'll see if something happens with it. There's a zucchini plant there, and some more beans. And let's see what else. I have to walk into the gate. There we go. I made it in. So this garden bed mostly has tomatoes. This bed is all wooden raised beds that my husband built me. It's had many different stages. These are the newest beds that he's put in. We used to just have 2 beds, and we've just expanded as time has gone on. We just tried to, little by little, make the garden better and bigger, but this year I'll show you the other garden. We've really expanded. Alright, so this bed has mostly tomatoes, but there are some marigolds in here, and I didn't plant any of them. They're all volunteers from last year. And then the calendula is just finishing up. I think the bugs have done a number on it, but there were a ton of calendula plants in here that volunteered as well. Let me, since I'm out here, deadhead these marigolds real quick. And that will keep them flowering. I also, while I walk through, I just pull off whatever leaves on my tomato plants that don't look great. So there's some tomatoes turning here. And a cucumber plant. I don't think there are any cucumbers on here right now. I just picked one. It's actually been producing pretty well. And there's another marigold. There are some like little arugula plants and a lettuce under here. I just had some seeds that fell to the bottom of my seed bin, and I just threw them in here to see what would happen. Oh, and there's a radish. So I don't know if they'll really do anything, but I used up the seeds, and it's always worth trying. There's some little beets from that, the bottom of my seed bin as well. And then these leaves need to go. So some tomatoes. Yep, things don't always go as planned. So these carrots are also being eaten by bugs, but hopefully they'll come back. And I have some little tomato volunteers, and it's late in the season, but we'll see if they do anything. And these little plants a rutabaga that I started, and it's my first time planting rutabaga, and they seem to be doing okay. They need to be thinned out a little, but I'm kind of seeing what survives first because we have so many bug problems right now. In here we have some basil and eggplant, and this right here I didn't pull. It's a volunteer. It planted itself. It's a tomatillo, and there's another one because you need two for them to actually produce fruit. There's another one over here by these buckets that's just growing out of the ground, not even in a bed, so that should work out fine. There's another cucumber with little baby cucumbers on it. So we should have a lot soon. This planter right here just has some extra plants that were didn't have a home. So there's two nasturtiums, a basil that's recovering from the bugs, and a Cosmo. And sometimes I pull off, I deadhead it to encourage growth, and sometimes I let them go to seed because I love, well, two things. They self-seed, so they'll come up somewhere else in my garden if I just let them go. But also the goldfinches really love them, so it just kind of depends on the day. Sometimes I deadhead them, and sometimes I just let nature happen. But these little orange ones are pretty. Over here we have eggplant. Well, we have zinnias. See, this is what I mean. The bug pressure has just been crazy with the heat. So in here we have a little eggplant. That's the first one, but I do see some other ones coming on. And this is back to the leek bed. Let's go over to another garden. So these marigolds here are all volunteers. There's some more bee balm or bergamot that's putting off new growth. So hopefully we get some more flowers out of that. The heat just made everything kind of go to seed faster than it should have. But I do have like Shasta daisies and gladiolas and stuff in here, but they are pretty much done. It's so hot. And there's some zinnias that haven't flowered yet. And these are some of my black cap raspberries that are done producing, but they did really well for me this year. This is my new garden that we put in this year. We had some overgrown land. It was kind of filled with invasive vines, so we had it cleared out. And we had some mulch dropped. Our local arborist actually dropped it for free because it worked out that we were near a job that he was doing and it saved him a trip. So he just dumped 2 big loads of mulch on our property. It was a ton of work, but it did help level everything out and suppress the weeds. And then I had gotten 2 of these raised beds, these metal raised beds that are down here. On Facebook Marketplace, somebody was selling 2 for $50, which is a great deal. She'd only used them for 1 year. And then I bought 4 more. On Amazon, I found the same ones, and they've worked out really well. The only thing is, I think I really prefer the wooden ones. These kind of are hard to get the moisture levels just right on, and also the edges you'll see on some of them have started to bow already, and this is my first year with them. But they were something quick that could get us gardening this year, and the cost of wood has just been so crazy that we didn't want to take the extra expense of building the beds this year. But I will show you some things that I have growing in here. So in this bed I have some zinnias, no flowers on them right now. I actually just cut them to bring them inside for a vase. And then I have a little basil plant, and then I have some peppers. And I bought these pretty late from a nursery, but I didn't have any bell peppers, and none of mine came up. So this plant actually has 2 that are turning, I think they turn red. And then this plant I already picked the pepper off of, and it has not yet put off any new flowers. I see some little buds coming on right there, but they haven't done anything. And then these are my yellow squash. I also bought these starts. I have terrible luck with squash, so I just figured I would start some seeds, I would plant some seeds directly in the ground, and I would buy some fully established plants and just see what I would get. So these are actually doing really well. So there's a squash there. I have pulled a couple plants that have given into vine borers, but there were so many. It was like supposed to be one plant, and I think there were like 7 plants growing out of it, and I just split them apart and planted them. But if you look in here, I actually have quite a few yellow squash coming on, so that's really exciting. These are carrots. These garden beds were put in like June, so normally we would plant the end of May, and everything went in like the first week of June or even later, so we're a little behind, but everything's catching up. This zinnia is so pretty. So it's a red zinnia. There's a few that are opening now. I try to cut them and bring them inside so that I can encourage the plants to branch off and produce more. I had some old cantaloupe seeds, and I just was like, okay, if I don't plant these now, I'm never going to plant them. So I put some in the ground right here, and I didn't think they were going to do anything, and they actually are, which is amazing. So we'll see if I get anything from that. Here's some beans. There's purple, yellow, and green. It's a mix, and then I actually think there's some dragon tongue beans mixed in here too. So let's look over here. This is kind of rough. So this corn, first time I've ever planted corn successfully. It's like a what is it? It's like a multicolored corn. So it's not for like fresh eating. It's for drying or decoration or popcorn. But I had the seeds. They were given to me for free, and I planted them, and they're actually doing really well, and we're starting to get corn cobs. So if I could find one. The problem is that they're doing so well that even with my fence that usually things don't get into, something is getting in here and eating the corn cobs. So if I show you down here, see all of the stalks that are broken, and there's more on the other side. Something, and I haven't been able to figure out what, I set up a trail cam to see if I can catch it. Something is getting in here, and all they do is they break the stalk in half, take the teeny tiny ear of corn, eat it, and then just leave things strewn everywhere. So I'm hoping I get something. If anything, I would like some to use as decoration, and I mean, if anything, it is kind of distracting the animals from other crops that they could be eating, so that's fine. It's just a fact. We'll have to deal with it. Over here, I have, this is very exciting. Like I said, I don't have very good luck with squash, but I bought some squash plants last minute just to put in and see what would happen. So, struggling with vine borers. You'll see further in another bed, there are some plants that are wilted that I'm just like holding out hope that they root and come back. But I've pulled a lot of plants, and some just haven't even made it to fruiting. But I'll show you one, and I hope that it becomes, like, it gets to ripeness. But look, here's my hand, and here's the butternut squash. That's pretty good size. And there's some other ones in here, some more squash. This is a zucchini that I started from seed. I forget the name of it, but I'm actually getting a zucchini, so that's fabulous. The first couple that came on this plant actually did not get properly pollinated and rotted on the vine. And this right here is a patty pan that I planted from seed, but I don't think it's going to do much. It's very stunted. We'll see what happens. Here's some more zinnias that aren't flowering yet. This is a Determinate Tomato. They flower once, settle their fruit, and then they're pretty much done. I bought this at a garden center, so there's a few tomatoes left on it that I'm waiting to ripen, and then I'll pull it and put something else there. In this space here, I actually started some beets, and they're all coming up. Tons of little beets, so we'll see what happens with that. There's some more tomato plants. This cucumber is a very light green. It's definitely in need of some fertilizer. I was hoping with the rain that it would get the nutrients it needs. But it's looking like I'm going to have to, it actually looks more yellow off camera. It looks more green on camera, so you're getting a better view of it than I am. I am definitely going to have to give this some sort of nutrients because it is like, it's almost yellow. It's not doing well, but it has been productive. It produces these little white cucumbers, and they don't get tough like the green variety, and they're actually very tasty. And then this is another type of cucumber that I can't remember right now. I think it's an Armenian cucumber, which is actually a melon. I haven't gotten anything off of this yet, but with the rain, it does seem to be doing better, so we'll see. Some beans. I have no hopes of these ever becoming sunflowers. I must have planted 50 sunflowers, and here are the 2 that I've gotten. So they don't have a head yet, but hopefully they will soon. I have horrible luck with sunflowers in this yard. I think the squirrels just think they're a treat and eat them. So here's the squash bed with bees buzzing in it. And unfortunately, this butternut squash right here was doing so well, and I think the plant has a vine borer because this is what it looks like now. So I went and tried to find the vine borer, couldn't find it. I ended up finding roots further along on the vine and trying to bury it to get it to reroot, and I just think it's a goner. So I don't know what to do with this little tiny butternut squash. It's not very big. I don't know if it'll finish ripening if I just leave it here or if it's a goner. I kind of have to look into that. But basically, my whole method for vine borers this year, because we have them terribly, is just plant a lot of squash plants, and if they don't make it, I just pull them and find the vine borer, crush it, and toss the plant. And then I just planted way more than I needed. Butternut squash is supposed to be vine borer resistant, but I mean, that one, maybe because it was a smaller plant, succumbed to them. I'm not really sure what's going on with that. Here's some beautiful zinnias. And then in that space back there, where I pulled all of the plants that had gotten infested with the vine borers, I did plant some peas. And then over here, I haven't planted anything yet, but I have some kale started inside that I'll plant there. So there are quite a few squash in here, which is, I mean, I have never grown a squash successfully. I have grown like 1 or 2 Jacoby Little pumpkins and some gourds. Every year I plant squash, and every year the pest pressure is just too much and they die. So this year we actually have more space because of adding the garden, so I figured I would just plant more and see what I could get. And honestly, it's much harder when you have a smaller garden to have room for that kind of error, but because I have more space now, there's some room for things to kind of die and I can still get something, so it's working out well. The same thing happened with cucumbers. For years and years I could not get cucumbers because of the cucumber beetles, and last year I just planted an entire packet of them and just pulled them as they gave into the pest pressure, and I was able to get some fruit. And this year, same thing, I have more space. So yes, you can grow in a small garden space, and I've done it for years. Something that has not been working this year that worked out really well last year is potatoes. They're just not doing well. They have flea beetles. These beds don't have great drainage. And I've just been leaving them in to get as many potatoes as possible. And then as the plants completely die off, I just pull them and take what I can get. And next year I will not plant potatoes here. I'll have to find a garden bed that works better. Maybe in that wooden garden or just directly in the ground. I was talking about everything's mulched, and things around here don't really eat potatoes. So I didn't even know if outside the fence back there, I could just throw a bunch of potatoes on the ground and cover them with some hay or some mulch or some dirt, and they'd probably do better out there. So that's probably my plan for next year, and that will actually free up 2 garden beds for me to plant other things in, and we'll see. Or maybe I'll just skip a year of growing potatoes. I'm not sure. And then in here, I had a, what's it called? I had a seed packet that literally was just an envelope, and I wrote mystery seeds on it because I have over the years had things like seed packets spill out, break open, and I don't even know what's in them, and I'm not taking the time to sort them out. And I had this bed that was not doing anything because I pulled out all the potatoes, and it's not time to put in my garlic yet. Obviously, I'm going to try to fix the drainage in these beds and maybe add some like perlite or vermiculite or something to make the soil less fluffy. The soil that's in here is kind of more clay than a lot of the other soils, but you can see there's a ton of seeds that came up. What I did was I just went through the pile of seeds that I had and picked out anything that looked like something that would take a long time to grow. So I picked out anything that looked like a squash seed, anything that looked like a pepper seed, and then everything else that got left in here was either like a brassica or a radish, or I think there might have been a few like wildflower seeds in there. So we will see what comes up. I mean, if nothing comes of it, at least this bed is not just open soil. There'll be something covering it, even if it doesn't produce food. And I don't have those seeds just sitting in my house doing nothing. So we'll see what comes of this. Things came up pretty fast because it rained, so that's great. And then the last bed in here is tomatoes, and then any squash you see in here was a volunteer. I used compost in this bed, and that's just what came up. There's also some basil in here, and some very, very sad dill that is not really doing anything over here. But there are some tomatoes that are starting to ripen. I've already picked quite a few, but right before I knew we were getting a lot of rain, I basically came out and picked anything that was turning slightly red because I didn't want anything to crack. So it'll be a little while before I get another tomato harvest out of here. And there's a few more things that I want to show you. I'm going to get out of this garden and close the gate because I don't want anything else getting in that could eat that corn. And then I'll be back. So, you'll notice these are like, I basically have cages around my grapevines. I planted them this year, and things love to munch on them. So I just have tried whatever I can to get things to stop munching them. But I do have 2 Concord grapes and 2 green table grapes growing. So there's 2. I should have labeled them. I don't know which is which, but I'm sure I'll know when they fruit. And there's another 2, and they're actually finally starting to take off. And I'm not going to show you everything today, but I'll just show you, I'll show you the beds over here, and I'll show you my greenhouse, and then next time I'll show you more. So these are more planters off of Amazon. Everything was just, I needed solutions this year, and we would like to build some more wood beds, but these actually have worked out really well. So in here, I don't know much about this, but I started asparagus from seed, and here are all the little asparagus plants, and they're going to take a while to get established, but they're in there. They're making their ferns, so that's really exciting. And then I just have some other things in between. I have some red onions that aren't doing great. I have some cosmos coming up, some basil, some chives, some marigolds that got eaten by something, but they're coming back. And then over here, this bed was supposed to be red onions. They're not doing great. And as they've died off, I just planted some radishes in between them. Even if I do not get any radishes out of these beds, they will go to seed and flower, and the animals will love them. So, and the bees. So, at least I don't have this bed empty. Over there, there's a barrel that has some oregano, and thyme and rosemary and some flowers. And the last thing is I will take you to the greenhouse. So I've had this greenhouse a few years. The greenhouse itself was actually a very generous gift. And the deck that is under it, we purchased and built. My husband and I built it. And I always grow my peppers in my greenhouse all season now, because I find that they kind of need a longer growing season that we just don't have here, and the nights start getting too cold and the days are too hot, and the fluctuation just is not great for their production. So I have just been letting them grow in my greenhouse, and we're really lucky that we have this and that we've been able to do this. But I do open the greenhouse door during the day, and there's like a little, I'll show you. This is actually a compost screen, but I just put it across the door so nothing can get in, and I leave it open so it's not too hot. And then on really hot days, I have this shade cloth over here that I put up and over the greenhouse to make it stay cool in here. But I think things, the peppers do much better in here because it kind of eliminates that fluctuation that they don't really like. So, here's 2 tomato plants. Sometimes I do tomato plants in here because it does extend my season. I start them a little bit later, and then I'll be getting tomatoes maybe in October or November in here. And then as soon as we get a hard frost, like, everything in here dies. It does not stay. I was going to try some kind of frost resistant like brassicas and greens in here later in the season and see how long I can get them to grow in here. I tried carrots last year and that just did not go well. So here's some pepper plants. I have some jalapenos. These are purple jalapenos, which are really fun, and I really need to harvest them because some of them are actually starting to turn red. These are shishitos that we're actually going to do a harvest on and have for dinner one night this week. I don't label things, so I don't know. These peppers haven't flowered yet, so I don't know what they are. We'll see. Some more jalapenos of different kinds, and I know there's some chilies in here somewhere. These I purchased at the garden center, and oh, sorry, they're starting to turn yellow. They are a sweet pepper Big Daddy. I don't know, but they look really good, and they're starting to turn, so I can't wait to pick those and eat those. I have some zinnias in here as well. Like to put flowers everywhere. And this is shocking. There's some Swiss chard and some kale growing in here, which I thought it would be too hot for them in here. I planted them in here in the early spring to get early chard and kale, which has worked out great. But these have been producing since, like, I don't know, April or May, and they're still going and have not bolted. So here is the Swiss chard, more peppers, and then in this bed I have little kale trees. They're really tall because I've been picking on them for months now, and they're still happy as can be in here, so that is fabulous. And there's some more peppers. I think one of these pepper plants is a Thai red chili, which I've never grown before, but I can't figure out which plant it is. So if anyone sees one, let me know. Alright, so thank you for coming. I'll show you a few more things as I'm talking. Here's strawberry barrel, rosebush and zinnias, and then I have a planter of flowers over here, and over there in the compost there's some volunteer tomatoes and tomatillos and a cantaloupe that's grown out of my compost bin, and things have eaten all the leaves off of it, but there is a tiny cantaloupe if you can see it, which is so funny. So thank you for joining me, and I'm sorry my camera work is horrible. I will get better at this, but have a great rest of your day, and thank you for joining.